is like your relationship to Cuba and what is Vietnam's relationship to Cuba? And like, why do you like defend it as you do?
This is a common sense in Vietnam. Vietnamese
Mm-hmm.
people, most of Vietnamese people, like most, I mean, like more than 90%, except some freaking three stripes, gusanos, anti-communist shitheads. Most of the Vietnamese people, like, we consider Cuba as our blood brother. You
Mm-hmm.
know, Vietnam and Cuba, we've been having a really good relationship with each other since like the 50s. And especially during the wartime, even though both countries we were both under the US sanction, but we've been trying our best to help each other, such as in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Cuba sent like doctors and engineers to Vietnam and to help Vietnam, the north of Vietnam, to rebuild our country. Actually, Fidel Castro did offer to send troops to Vietnam, but like at that time, like Ho Chi Minh decided to be like, this is the Vietnam War, the war of Vietnamese people. So they really don't want to drag Cuban comrades into this war. So that's why like Cuba, like instead they help us a lot with different stuff like
Mm-hmm.
food, engineer, doctors,
Mm-hmm.
and also like there's one like true story is this that Vietnamese people would never forget. In the 50s, because both Vietnam and Cuba were so poor, and Cuba they made a lot of sugar, famous for making sugar. So
Mm-hmm.
Cuba they made sugar and they sold all the sugar to the USSR, and then they sent all the money to Vietnam to help Vietnam. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
solidarity between like two freaking poor brothers, but like
Mm-hmm.
trying our best to survive and to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, when Vietnam was under comprehensive US sanction, and we barely had any vaccines or medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot trade with other countries. So Cuba was the only one country that donated vaccines to Vietnam through those years. Like a lot of millions of Vietnamese people were born in the 80s and in the 90s. We were all saved by the Cuba vaccines. Right now, the Cuban vaccines floating in my veins right now, and I could have died. I
Yeah.
could have died if it was not because of the Cuba vaccine. So yes, and especially when the things happened in Cuba just a few weeks ago, Vietnam immediately sent like 12,000 tons of rice to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
also we erased the debt
Mm-hmm.
for Cuba. Cuba owed us about like $150 million in that, and we erased all the debt. And also like we've been like giving the rice technology, the technology to grow rice to Cuba or something like that. So like it is like if you look at the relationship between Vietnam and Cuba, you know, like the two socialist countries, when they have a relationship with each other, money is not like money is irrelevant. We don't do it because of money. We do it
Mm-hmm.
because we truly care for each other. So Cuba gave us their vaccines and technology to make vaccines. We gave them the technology to grow rice, like to truly help each other
Yeah. Yeah.
during the hard time. And just so like, yep, it is it. So that was why, like, because Vietnam and Cuba, we share so much the same situation for decades. So that was why, like, when I first heard about the protest, the anti-government protest happened in Cuba, I immediately knew that this is super fishy. This is another color revolution. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing that been happening in Vietnam for decades. So if you want to talk about color revolution, Vietnamese communists are expert about this because we've been dealing with this for so long time right now. That was why, like, I like wholeheartedly defend Cuba.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because Cuba and Vietnam are two countries that share a history of, struggle like under the boot of US imperialism and also under the boot of like, these terrible US sanctions and embargo. But you I don't remember when the US sanctions were lifted off of Vietnam, but you're old enough to remember like living under US sanctions, right? So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about like living under sanctions, what life was like, and just the what difference it is now that you're not living under them anymore?
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of the sanction.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. set sanction on Vietnam in the 1965-64, since the Vietnam War. At that time, they set a sanction on the north of Vietnam. In 1975, when we won the Vietnam War and we reunited Vietnam, the U.S. set a sanction on the whole north and south of Vietnam since 1975, and they made it even more severe with the Pol Pot thing, in Cambodia. And like the comprehensive sanction since like 1979 to 1994. In 1994, when the president of the U.S. came to Vietnam, Bill Clinton, or I don't know exactly, but like the kind of the procedure of removing the sanctions started from 1994, and lots of people think that was it. 1994 was the year that the sanction was lifted, but actually it was
that's
not.
what I've read, but
The procedures,
that's not the case.
Exactly, not the case, because like yes, they talked about removing it in 1994, but the procedure, the negotiation lasts from until 2006. When because the USA, they asked Vietnam need to do this, need to do that, needs to do all the things they want if we want to be lifted from the sanction. It was very fucked up. The main reason why we had the reforms was to persuade the US to stop sanctioning Vietnam. Not until 2006 the relationship between Vietnam and the USA is normalized. Right, 1 year later, in 2007, we joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and only since then we are free to trade with other countries. So something it was a big news in Vietnam at that time, 2007. We just normalized the relationship with the USA, and now we finally joined the World Trade Organization. We could, even though I was I was 15, 16 years old, even though I was super not into politics at the time, I didn't know anything. I remember that memory. A whole Vietnam screaming in happiness, holy shit, we finally can trade with the world. Something like that. So I was born in the early 90s, born under the sanction. And I can tell you that my childhood, wow, sometimes the current life in Vietnam right now is so different that sometimes I even forgot that I lived through that time. It was so poor, and my family was so poor. I don't know what I can how can I explain that to you. I had to cook with there was no stable electricity at that time. It's one day there's electricity and one day it's off, and when things got better, maybe a half of a day there's electricity, and the other half is no electricity. And of course there was nothing like electric stove or gas stove. I had to cook with straw stove and wooden stove my whole childhood. There was nothing like fridge or oven or air conditioner or nothing like that. I didn't have any candies or real snacks, except when I was super sick and I had to beg my mom, Mom, can you buy me some cookies? And my mom would buy me some, and that's it. No fresh milk. The first time I had fresh milk when I was 15, after the lockdown, after the sanction was gone. I had only the condensed milk. That is why the Vietnamese coffee.
Yeah,
the
that's
whole
why. Yeah,
culture of Vietnamese coffee was. It was why we don't have fresh milk for our coffee, because it started from the 90s when Vietnam started grow more coffee and try to export it to the whole world. That was why our coffee is so unique, because we only had condensed milk with the coffee. And it became the sanction time actually became one of our culture, the coffee culture. And I didn't have any new clothes. I have one older brother, and all I had was old clothes from my brother. you know, like it was kind of traumatized to me at that time because I was a girl. I want beautiful clothes and dresses, but I could not. And it is a sadness that I felt for years, and I could not. I didn't dare to talk to my mom or my dad. I didn't know what it was. It's just like traumatized and sadness, and feel like a confidence.